Welcome, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm really happy to have met Nora and learn a little bit more about what you folks are doing. Not too far away, actually, from the Izaak Walton League's national office in Gaithersburg, Maryland. So my name is Abby Hileman. I'm the Salt Watch coordinator at the Izaak Walton League of America. And today I'm going to talk to you about the Salt Watch program. Salt Watch is a national community science monitoring program, and it has a focus to mobilize volunteers to test local waterways for road salt pollution, and then also to advocate for smarter road salting practices across the United States. And so that's what we're going to talk about here today. So Salt Watch started in 2018 after this pretty large road salt spill happened outside of our national office headquarters in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And this salt spill was on top of a storm drain, which was leading directly into the Muddy Branch, which is a local waterway that leads into the Potomac River. And one of our clean water fellows at the time, he had been monitoring the Muddy Branch, the waterway underneath where this salt spill occurred. And overnight, the chloride levels increased from about 30 parts per million, which is within naturally occurring limits, up over 600. It might have even been 800 parts per million, which is pretty toxic to most of our aquatic life. So there is some dispute over whose jurisdiction this salt spill actually occurred in, whether it was the city of Gaithersburg, whether it was Montgomery County Department of Transportation, whether it was a private contractor, but eventually the salt spill was cleaned up. But unfortunately, that damage was already done to the waterway below. So we launched Salt Watch. And we had goals to raise awareness in the general public about the connection between road salt and stream health, and then also public health. We wanted to identify chloride hotspots in fresh water, and we also wanted to advocate for smarter salt application by sharing some of the results of Salt Watch with private landowners and local and state agencies. And so this was really how Salt Watch launched. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you guys can get involved in Salt Watch as well. As part of the program, we give away free chloride testing kits. And I'll use the words chloride and road salt interchangeably. Chloride is a component of most of the road salts that are used. We give out free chloride testing kits or Salt Watch kits to anyone who's interested in testing local waterways for road salt pollution. Each test kit contains 4 chloride test strips, sample testing instructions, a conversion chart to convert your strips that you get into parts per million or milligrams per liter, and then also instructions for how to upload that data to our national database. And again, they're free, and we mail them to people's addresses. So very easy and effective, and very quick to do the test as well. And they're pretty accurate. So since the beginning of the program, in 2018, we've received, and I updated this today, we've received over 15,000 data points from across the country. Most of that data is coming from our region here, sort of the mid-Atlantic, but we also have quite a few data points in Minneapolis, Detroit, Chicago, Iowa. The dots that you're seeing there on the map, the larger the dot, the more samples that have been received in that area. And then the colors also correspond to sort of how good of a sample we have received. Good being, is it high chloride, low chloride? The designations that we have here, so 30% of the samples that we've received from the beginning of the program have been between 0 and 30 parts per million. The test strips that we give out, the lowest that they read is about 30 parts per million. So if you're not seeing a reading showing up or it's below what the test strip can read, that sample is considered to be excellent. 36% of the samples that we've received have been between 30 and 100 parts per million. 100 parts per million is really that cutoff in most areas where chloride is no longer naturally occurring. If it's above 100 parts per million, it means that we've really added it in. And some places like Maryland, levels like around 50 is sort of that cutoff. So anything below 50 in this region means that it's sort of within the naturally occurring limits of chloride. 19% of samples have been between 100 and 230 parts per million. 100 parts per million, again, is that cutoff where we know that if it's above that, it's definitely no longer naturally occurring within the environment. 230 parts per million is where it starts to become toxic to aquatic life if it remains at 230 parts per million over a period of time. And then anything above 230 parts per million is considered toxic. So 15% of the samples we've received since the beginning of the program have actually been toxic to aquatic life. We could not do any of this without our partners. We have 46 partners across the United States. So like you guys, you're right in the center there, neighbors of the Northwest Branch. So thank you so much. You're a recent partner of SaltWatch, and we could not do this program without you. And one really great thing that a lot of our partners do is they help to fill some of the data gaps that we have within our data. So historically, we have a lot of data throughout Montgomery County. Chloride does change, however, very rapidly in the environment. And so it's always good to get more samples at all times of the year, since chemical samples are really a snapshot of what's happening in a stream at a given moment. So areas like the District of Columbia and Prince George's County, if you live in those regions, we could certainly use more data in those areas. But that being said, we can always use more data in some of the areas we already have data in as well. So a little bit of background, what is road salt or winter salt? So there's 4 typical kinds. The most common and the least expensive is sodium chloride, which is NaCl. And then there's also potassium chloride, magnesium chloride, and calcium chloride. Road salt is also applied a number of different ways. The photo that you're seeing sort of the back of that dump truck, that's a granular application of road salt. That's what we're used to seeing. There's some downsides to the granular application. One is that it's very concentrated. You have just that rock, that concentrated rock of road salt, and it does tend to bounce off of the roadways whenever it's applied. But it does have its purposes and its times that it does need to be applied, such as during some storm events. Something that we're seeing more often is those lines that are down there on the road. Some people use the phrase, we love the lines, because we do love the lines. This is an anti-icing procedure. It's something that folks put down before storm events, and it actually creates a layer between the roadway and whatever precipitation is coming down to make it so things stick less to the roadway. This is a brine application, which is still a road salt application, but it does contain water. It's about 30% road salt and I cannot do math today, and 70% water solution. And so this is one way that folks are using to reduce the amount of road salt that's being applied into the environment. It's something that is directly applied to the surface of the roadway, and it doesn't create any sort of bounce. So in a lot of road conditions or weather conditions, people can put down this anti-icing, this brine application, and that's one way that we're seeing a lot of folks to reduce their road salt application. Granular salt still does have its purposes and its uses, but if you're not sure if your local Department of Transportation is reducing their road salt application, if you see those lines out there, they're probably doing their best to do so. There are a number of wildlife impacts that road salt has. Road salt does affect fish, but macroinvertebrates, plankton, and microbes might be even more sensitive than fish. Vernal pools may also be more intensely affected, as are the organisms that spawn in them. Vernal pools are those seasonal pools that occur as a result of snowmelt. If road salt goes into those vernal pools, those seasonal pools, unfortunately, a lot of times it doesn't have an exit, since most of that water ends up evaporating throughout the season. And so the chloride sort of builds up and builds up over time. And a lot of organisms like amphibians are incredibly sensitive, and they spawn in those environments, leading to some issues. Mammals can also be negatively impacted by drinking high chloride streams, as well as using roadways as salt licks. I'm sure a lot of folks have seen deer out there licking the roadways after road salt has been applied, or even in the summer. And that sometimes puts mammals into really bad situations with car drivers as well. And there are a number of drinking water impacts. If you don't care about wildlife so much, which I know a lot of you folks do, drinking water is something that really does impact us as well. So chloride is different than chlorine. It's an anion, it's a negatively charged ion, and it does not disinfect water. Chloride is not typically removed at wastewater treatment plants or water filtration plants because it's really, really expensive, and they need specific infrastructure, specific equipment to do so. So any chloride during winter weather that ends up into our drinking water or into the streams that then go to our drinking water, it's not being removed at water treatment plants. And that can impact public health. Folks who are on low sodium diets, so again, sodium chloride is one of the most common road salts that we use. If you are on a low sodium diet, that sodium can enter the drinking water as well. And so you might be getting additional sodium in your diet from that drinking water and have no idea about it, that's happening, since that's something else that they're not removing. And then there's also infrastructure impacts as well. It's incredibly corrosive, and it costs the US between $16 and $19 billion annually in damages to roadways and bridges. And something else with infrastructure that's actually related to drinking water, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Flint water crisis that occurred in 2014. Chloride was actually one of the reasons for that crisis to have occurred. Since it's incredibly corrosive, there's quite a few things that happened that went wrong or that didn't occur to create the Flint water crisis. One of those things was they switched their water source directly to the Flint River. It was April. The chlorides were high during that time because of all of the road salt that had washed into the river. And they didn't use any anti-corrosives, which they normally would use for water. And that chloride ended up corroding out all of that lead and copper piping, which ended up directly into people's drinking water. So our infrastructure can certainly be impacted in a number of different ways. There's also a CRV recall this past winter too, that was directly linked to road salt too. So lots of damages. And again, that $16 to $19 billion, that's just to bridges and roadways, that doesn't reflect any personal repairs like to our vehicles and our own walkways and driveways and things as well. On our website, we do have a number of resources. I just came out with these fairly recently, so there's a nice chloride in drinking water fact sheet, and then also some chloride in infrastructure. And we do have a number of other advocacy resources as well, such as letters to the editor, letters to some of your legislators. We have some flyers, and then I also created it's a pretty big resource, but an advocacy guide for talking to different groups of applicators, whether they're for hire contractors, your DOTs, whether you're talking to HOAs or your neighbors, and there's some different templates and things there as well. And one really great thing that happened this past year is in 4 different states, actually, there were bills that legislators were trying to pass through for road salt reductions. Maryland actually had one, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and then also Vermont was the 4th one. Wisconsin was the only one that is still sort of going through, as far as I know. The other ones, unfortunately, did not leave committee, but it's a really good step in the right direction that we're thinking about the problem and we're trying to reduce that road salt that's going out into. And just as a really good visual for you folks, it only takes 1 teaspoon of salt to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water. So if you think about that 50-pound bag of salt that you typically pick up at the beginning of winter, that can actually permanently pollute 10,000 gallons of water, which is about the size of a swimming pool, a small swimming pool. So something to think about. 1 teaspoon of salt permanently pollutes 5 gallons of water, just because there's really no feasible way to remove it once it gets into the environment. And something else that I like to show is it's really hard to sort of visualize, well, what is the right amount of salt that you put down? So one 12-ounce mug, so your typical coffee mug, is actually holds enough salt to salt about 10 sidewalk squares or a 20-foot long driveway. The photo right here that has all of that salt, the sidewalk's almost white in that photo, that is way too much salt. In reality, all of those little grains of salt, they should be spread out about 3 inches apart. And that actually leaves room for it to really work. So if you're feeling that crunch of salt underfoot, that's probably too much salt. And something that you can actually do, the steps you should take during the winter. I know this past winter, we really didn't have, we had maybe 2 days of cold weather. Shoveling early and often, that helps to clear those walkways before snow turns to ice. Scatter salt, so again, that 12-ounce mug holds enough salt to treat a 20-foot long driveway or 10 sidewalk squares. And then you can actually sweep too. Not only can you sweep that snow and ice while you're shoveling maybe, but you can also sweep up any excess salt and reuse it. So maybe you dumped a little bit of salt, or maybe the storm has passed and everything's sort of melted. You can sweep up that salt and reuse it during the next storm event. And so that is all I have as far as the presentation. Nora asked as well that I go over sort of how the test strips work and how to report that data to us. So I'll go ahead and do that. But please visit our website, saltwatch.org. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at saltwatch@IWLA.org. And please salt responsibly. You'll help to protect not only our drinking water, but habitat, wildlife, roadways, sidewalks, cars, pets, and so much more. So
I wonder if we could maybe pause to see if anyone has questions at this point.
Yeah, this is a perfect time for questions. Thank you.
Because actually I did.
Okay.
You said the 100 parts per million was like the threshold between naturally occurring versus like pollution. And so I was just curious, what are the natural sources of chloride?
Well, it does naturally occur in the environment. And so some of that has to do with like rock chemistry and things like that. But it is throughout the environment naturally. I mean, that's where we get our salt from to eat on our table. It's the same stuff. So NaCl, same stuff that you're applying on the roadways, same stuff that we're eating. Please don't eat the road salt that's on the road. They have additional additives to that as well that you don't want to eat. But it is naturally occurring in the environment due to geology and just sort of how everything goes together. I'm not a geologist, so I probably do not have the best answer to that question.
Thanks.
It looks like Anne has a question.
Is the sodium or the magnesium chloride, is that less harmful than sodium chloride?
So actually, let me go back to that slide. Oop, there we go. So the magnesium chloride and also calcium chloride, they actually work at a lower temperature than the sodium chloride. The sodium chloride stops working about 15 degrees. But the magnesium chloride and the calcium chloride, I forget exactly what those cutoffs are, but they do go a little bit lower. They are not less environmentally harmful. As far as corrosivity and harmful to aquatic life, as you see for the chemical, it's MgCl2 and CaCl2. So both of those actually have more chloride in them whenever those bonds break. So they can actually be more harmful than the sodium chloride. And something else too with the magnesium and the calcium chloride, they tend to attract water. And so they actually can be a little bit slippery too, if they're used when it's warmer out, as opposed to using the sodium chloride. There aren't fantastic alternatives to using road salt. And so our message is not to stop salting, but it's to be smarter or more mindful about how much salt that you use. There are some things that people are looking into, such as acetates, which are potentially more environmentally friendly than some of the chloride containing salts that are out there, but nothing that is perfect yet. And there are a number of additives. I'm sure a lot of you have seen things like beet juice that have been added that adds some water to the salt. It helps it to work a little bit faster. It has some color, so you know that the salt has been applied. And there are a number of mixes out there too, or blends of different salts. If you're going out to purchase salt at a store, pay attention to what some of the labels say. A lot of them will say that they're eco-friendly or pet safe. That's really not true. There's no regulation on any of the packaging that's out there for the salt products. So pay attention to that, but also pay attention to what is actually in the salt that you're buying as well. Do we have any other questions? And let me know if I didn't answer anything.
I don't see any questions in the chat, so I think we're ready for the next part whenever you are.
Okay, perfect. Let me go back. Okay, so again, in the SaltWatch kit, you'll receive 4 chloride testing strips. To test, it's really simple and easy. All you need is one of those test strips, a small jar or cup, ideally glass or plastic. Some of the paper cups can sort of leave a little bit of residue and might interact a little bit with the strips themselves. So all you have to do, you don't even have to get in the water, go to a stream near you, add some water to your cup, rinse and repeat 3 times. So fill up your cup, empty it out, fill up your cup, empty it out, fill up your cup, empty it out, fill up your cup to about 1/2 inch to 1 inch of water. The reason why we're rinsing and repeating is if you went to multiple stream sites before, you just want to make sure that there's no residue in your cup. So just a nice rinse out, and then you're ready to go. You put the test strip in with that Quantab wording there at the top of the strip. Try to make sure that the top of the strip does not get wet, just that bottom, which is why we're only leaving about 1/2 inch to 1 inch of water in your cup. And then you wait about 3 minutes. Sometimes it can take as long as 10 minutes, but usually it'll be done in about 2 to 3 minutes. How do you know if your test is done? I have 2 test strips here. This one, the one on the left, it has an orange top to the Quantab strip, that horizontal line. That means it has not been used. Once that horizontal line turns sort of this blue, blackish purple color completely through, that means that it is ready to read. And you'll also notice here at the bottom of the strip, there's sort of a whitish yellow peak. What you're going to be doing is reading the top of the peak there once that test is ready to be read. So what that looks like, and this is that conversion chart that you'll receive with your test strip, or with your test kit. You'll read the top of where that peak falls. So for this one, it falls at 4. You'll put that on your conversion chart, come over to Quantab units, go down. You'll notice it says 4, which is 157 parts per million. So that 157 is that number that is really the one that you want. You will need that Quantab unit as well when submitting your data, but 157 is the parts per million chloride that we were talking about, or the milligrams per liter. So once you have that, We have a website called the Clean Water Hub, and this is all included in your kit as well in the instructions. You'll be submitting your data at www.cleanwaterhub.org/saltwatch. And this is our national database that we use to submit not only saltwatch data, but nitrate watch data, which is another one of our programs, and then also Save Our Streams, which is a benthic program run by us too, and we have additional chemical data that we can submit here too. This submission will just do saltwatch for you. So it'll prompt you to sign up. So you'll need your email address, first name, last name, and a password. And then once you have created an account, you don't need to do that again. You can just click log in the next time you go to submit data, and it'll bring you to a site that looks like this, a screen that looks like this. So Saltwatch is already selected here. It'll ask you to create a Saltwatch reading, which is that button that you'll click, and it'll bring you to a form that looks like this. It'll have a drop-down menu that says select the site. If you have not created a site before, that will look like this. It'll ask you to create a new site. So this is your sample site location that you're creating right here. So you'll be naming the site. So maybe it's call it drainage ditch at whatever my road name is, or stream X, Y, and Z at this location. Name of the water source, if applicable, and then also the water source type, which I'll show you what that looks like in a moment, and a site description. So maybe you're 20 feet away from a stop sign. Try to give some detail of exactly where you're sampling so somebody else could maybe repeat that sample site later. Some water sources that you can select: a private groundwater well, public drinking water system, small stream or creek, river, I cannot speak today, I'm sorry, river, lake, pond, wetland, drainage, or outlet pipe, and then other, and you can specify that in the the site description. You can also add a photo of your site, and then the city, state, latitude, longitude. You can also look in on this map. You can type in address in the search bar and drop a pin for where that location is. Or if you're on your phone, in approximately the location that you're sampling, you can turn that add location mode on, and that should help to fill out some of that data. If it doesn't, again, you can type in your city, state, or zoom in to where that location is. And then you'll start entering data from your Saltwatch reading. So what was the survey date? When was the most recent precipitation? I'll show you what those prompts are. The Quantab unit. So remember on the example that we did, that was that number 4. So we went down on the Quantab units, found 4, and went across. So Quantab unit, and then chloride reading was that milligrams per liter. Most recent precipitation was less than 12 hours ago, 12 to 48 hours ago, 2 to 7 days ago, 1 to 2 weeks ago, or more than 2 weeks ago. So keep these things in mind as you're taking those tests. And then at the very end, if you're using our chloride test strips, we do ask that you look at the expiration date and lot number. Those are both shown on that conversion chart. So we have a picture right here, the expiration date used by this date, just write that in, and then also the lot number. Please input that information as well. And then if you had any comments about that specific test, you can input that information in as well. It's really important to keep your strips, your chloride strips, with your conversion chart that they came with, because those conversion charts do vary sort of each time we send them. They might have different lot numbers. So please keep those together, which is why we've prompted expiration date and lot number. And then make sure to click Save Changes once you're done. So that's one way to submit your data. Another way is, this is that sort of main site that pops up when you enter in the Clean Water Hub. If you go to Maps, you can click on the community map. And this is actually how you submit your data directly to Neighbors of the Northwest Branch or any other organizations that you'd like to submit data to. So you search organizations. After clicking that, make sure organizations here is clicked, not sites. Type in Neighbors of the Northwest Branch. Neighbors of the Northwest Branch will pop up. You can click on Neighbors of the Northwest Branch. And this is this lovely page that Nora has set up for you folks. And on this page, you can click Join Organization, and then you can submit some data directly to Neighbors of the Northwest Branch. If you've already submitted data, that's okay. You can just let us know or let Nora know, and Nora can let us know, and we can associate that data with Neighbors of the Northwest Branch. On this webpage, you can learn more about Neighbors of the Northwest Branch. You can download the sites and readings, so any data that has been uploaded for any of the sites that's associated with Neighbors of the Northwest Branch, you can download, or you can click on these different sample site locations that Nora has already set up. And so if you are sampling at one of these locations, you can just keep going back to the same location and keep submitting data specifically to that location. So say that we wanted to click on one of these to submit data. So Neighbors of the Northwest Branch at Branch Bridge, you click on that site, you click Create a Reading, and then you click Create a Salt Watch Reading. And then you're able to submit data basically through the same form that we had gone through before, except you don't have to fill out site information. If you have any questions about how to use the Clean Water Hub, at the top of the webpage, there are some additional links, such as the help link, and that goes through some different user guides and tutorials for really how to use the Clean Water Hub if you have any questions, but feel free to send me an email too if you have any questions. So that is what I have. Does anyone have any questions before I hand it back over to Nora? Okay, question from Ben.
Thank you so much for the presentation. What's the frequency of, maybe I missed this, the frequency of tests? Is it weekly?
Yeah, good question. I actually didn't go over that, so thank you so much. So as far as testing, that's totally up to you, whatever works best for you. Ideally, we would have people test once per month. And then there are some additional dates around weather events in the winter that you could test at too. But especially right now, getting some of that baseline data and then testing after some of the weather events in the winter, like after a big snowstorm or ice storm, whenever you know that roadways have been salted, you can test then and probably see some of the spikes. But really monthly is what we're looking for ideally, but we know that everyone is busy. So as often as you can would be great, but monthly is ideal. Thank you for that question.
Is it useful to start before roads may have been salted to have like a baseline for a site?
Absolutely. Yep, definitely. And road salt also, it's something that changes very quickly too. Even within like a couple hours, the chloride levels can change very drastically. So really, as often as you can test, that's great. But especially right now, establishing that baseline test to see really what does that chloride level look like is really good. But testing throughout the year, ideally once a month, is wonderful. That would be perfect. And sometimes during the summertime too, we do still see spikes of chloride, and that's because it might infiltrate the groundwater, or if there's drought conditions especially, then you'll see more chloride in the waterways as well.
Okay, thank you.
Question from Anne?
Yeah, I was reading the fine print on there and it said that we test first Saturday of the month. Okay, well, what if one is not available on the first Saturday of the month? Would Sunday do? I mean,
so maybe that's a good segue into what I was gonna show everybody, which is sort of just an organizational tool for us all. You know, we're all here because we're interested in salt in the Northwest Branch. So I put together a spreadsheet to keep us all organized. And because Abby told me that having this monthly data would be really helpful, I set it up so that we can cover 4 initial sites along the Northwest Branch monthly. So why don't I go ahead and share my screen? All right. And so the first page here is just some instructions. But those of you who have done water quality monitoring with Anacostia Riverkeeper might find this spreadsheet familiar looking. That's because I copied it from them. The sites are also copied from Anacostia Riverkeeper. So that means that we know those sites are, accessible. They're at locations where you can get down to the water to test easily, little beaches near trails or parks. And who knows, maybe one day this will be incorporated with that water quality monitoring procedure. But for now, we don't have to worry about all that. We can just go and do our salt monitoring. So if you would like to participate in these as a monitor for one of these 4 sites, the first thing to do would be to request a Salt Watch kit from Izaak Walton League's website, and that will give you, like Abby said, 4 test strips. So your kit has 4 test strips, so you can sign up for 4 different dates. Also on this spreadsheet is a page about the location. So there's those directions about how to get there and a handy link to the site on Clean Water Hub. And GPS coordinates, which you can put right into your phone if you want to. The locations, there are 2 in Montgomery County, Branch Bridge and Burnt Mills, and then 2 in Prince George's County, Lane Manor Park and the 38th Avenue Park. So first up is October. I thought that would give us enough time to get all of our kits in order. There are 3 slots here for each location. The first one is that first Saturday of the month. That's just so we ensure we have a sort of regularly spaced data set coming in. And then I added sections here for on call. That's so that we could respond to weather events. So if, there's snow or ice forecasted and they put a lot of salt down, we're going to want to monitor around that event. I know this is not likely to happen in October. So if you sign up for those, you might not be called this month, but we're going to continue doing this throughout the year. So if you sign up for one of these on-call slots, I will be looking at the forecast and I will call or email you the day ahead of time when we expect that might happen to work that out. And then, I just put the rest of 2023 on here. I hope that we have enough people interested that we can continue this, regularly throughout 2024 as well. But this should get us started. Does anyone have questions about that? Yeah, Anne.
Me again. Well, you said these were all water quality monitoring sites, and I know that the bridge, that first one, the bridge on the Northwest Branch, is not a water quality monitoring site.
True.
However, it is certainly possible to get to that site. I mean, you must have gone down there and looked it over.
I did. This past week, I looked at all of them to make sure I had the coordinates right and to take pictures.
Yeah.
The Lane Manor, as Melissa pointed out in the chat, it is not an active water quality monitoring site this year, but it used to be. And, I didn't know since it's already in their kind of data infrastructure, if they decided to expand the program next year, they might go back to that site or something like that. That's why I wanted to include it. And so this NWB 1, 2, and 3, that naming comes from ARC's water quality monitoring. I wanted to keep the naming consistent for anyone who's familiar with that program.